Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio Podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada. In episode 17, we speak with Lyle McDonald of BodyRecomposition.com on his recent book and research into the intricacies of women's fitness and nutrition.
New York for me is like New York's a love-hate, man. Like, yesterday I got home and I'm like, there's no other place I want to live. And yesterday morning I woke up and I'm like, hang me, I want to move to San Diego. So I've been saying that those have been my days every day for the last probably 13 years of my life. So
yeah, I can believe it. I can absolutely believe it.
I love it. Well, listen, thanks for coming on, man. It's always great to get someone who's, so well groomed in your field. And I think today what we want to do is just kind of not get so technical, but more give our viewers some great information that they can benefit from, give a little background on what you do, where you're from exactly. And let's just have a fun conversation, man. Let's just go for it.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's a good pairing here because you guys are both heavy into the nutrition stuff. I just eat. But I remember I was talking to Lyle like years ago, and he always talks about the people. There's some people out there who will just eat like chicken breast and broccoli, and Lyle, this is the guy. He'll eat just chicken breast and broccoli.
I do not. I ate ice cream last night. You'd be proud of me. I ate some ice cream last night.
I will actually argue that ice cream is the perfect diet food, and here's why. Got a dairy protein, calcium, and your body has to burn calories to heat it up. So I think ice cream is actually
And I actually agree with you. It's my way of cheating clean. That's what I call it.
Yeah. Especially in this country, you can get low fat or at least fat reduced anything. I know people love that new Halo Top stuff that at least has, some protein.
But I think I personally want to taste like shit, but I also think it's garbage. What's your
I tried it once and it wasn't. It's got a lot of sugar alcohols, which I don't care for, and they don't care for me. So, it wasn't my favorite. I'd rather probably, like you, just get something that tastes good and eat a little bit less. So.
Well, I don't know about the eating less. I'm more of a, if you're gonna, I'm one of those where it's like, if you're gonna do it, just
fair enough.
Do it. It's like
I can find that.
I was just having a conversation about alcohol. I'm not a huge drinker. I mean, once in a while I'll go do it. And someone asked me, well, when you drink, what do you drink? And I'm like, well, when in Rome? Like, it's like, if I'm at a Mexican restaurant, they're serving great margaritas, I'll drink margaritas. Yeah. They're like, well, aren't you worried about the calories? And I'm like, no, I'm not worried about the calories if I do it once every month. I'm more worried about what it's doing to me hormonally. Fine. Like, I'm more worried about the fact I'm going to wake up the next day and just not feel optimal, maybe get a bad night rest. But if you're someone who doesn't do it a lot to begin with, go have what you want. Relax.
Yeah, because when I was I was an endurance athlete for a lot of years. Super skinny when you're training 15 hours a week, and we'd go to a buffet or whatever, and people would just watch me eat all the food, and they're like, "How do you stay?" Like, because I do this maybe once a week tops. Like, I don't eat like this all the time. And that's how, nutrition especially is such an extremist attitude. I still see it. Like, oh my God, if you have a cookie, you've thrown away your health, which is always coming from guys jacking a gram of anabolics a day. This is your concern about your health, right?
I love it. I love you already.
Diet soda I had to drink.
I know.
Okay. But you get that all or nothing attitude that just – it drives people crazy because then, you know what they do? They have the thing, feel guilty, and just go off the rails. And it's like, no, just eat it. Get over it. It's fine. Just don't do it all the time.
Sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm going to go here right now because you're like right now what you're basically doing is you're throwing gasoline on a fire with it. And you're getting me revved up, which means in about 2 minutes I'm going to be screaming out of excitement. But I was funny. I was having a conversation with a woman the other day and she's flipping out over gluten and this and that and her diet. And I'm like, lady, like I know for a fact, like 2 weeks ago you were doing drugs and drinking alcohol right now, and now you're talking to me about vegan and you're talking to me about all this stuff. Like calm it down. Like you don't put the cart before the horse here. Focus on the problem at hand.
I knew a girl one time years ago who was like chain smoker, coke addict, alcoholic, and told me, I don't think those protein bars are very good for you. Okay.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So I mean, have you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but have you built a career on really focusing more on females' hormones, on dieting for women?
Oh, no. That was, if anything, I would say I avoided the topic in detail for most of my career because I knew it would be exhausting. Like, right. I knew that, I mean, we've known observationally, we know that women have it more difficult than men. Right. And I just kind of like, I would pay attention to it, and usually it was like female trainees or whatever. But the genesis of this most recent thing, I was rewriting a book about 3.5 years ago, and had written this monster general fat loss manual and got, you know what, to the women's section. I'm like, this shouldn't take long at all. And 3.5 years and 438 pages later, and it kind of spun off the rails because women are just complex in a way that men aren't. Men are very simply crude from top to bottom, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And women are complicated, not only just in general, but women have what I call hormonal modifiers. You got the menstrual cycle, right, which is the 4-week cycle. Women's physiology changes broadly from the first 2 weeks to the second 2 weeks, and their mood may shift, and their performance may shift, and water retention and fuel use and all this other crap. And then men have one cycle, as I like to put it, which is about 60 years from puberty till death of just being an asshole, right? That's just guys. A guy walks into the gym, he's the same dude basically every day.
I know.
You know, you might be tired from yesterday's workout. A woman from week to week to week, well, there may be no change. I've seen women that were just a flat line, performance and every otherwise. I had one trainee, right after she started menstruating, she could hit PRs in a heartbeat. Wow. During the 4th week of the cycle, she couldn't lift more than 60% on machines. Like, it was, and there were sort of small, so eventually I just programmed her training that way. But, you know, you've seen this. A woman comes into the gym, her mood is off. As a therapist put it to me one time, like, if she's crying in 2 minutes, I know this is my patient today. And 3 days from now, I may be working with a completely different person. So you got the general menstrual cycle dynamics, add to that birth control, which is unbearably complicated. It took me months to figure out, because birth control, you've got the pill, the patch, the injection, the implant, the cervical ring, and a hormonal IUD, all of which have subtly different effects. You've got polycystic ovary syndrome, which is quite common and affects physiology. And then you've got the age-related changes at menopause and whether or not they go on hormone replacement or not. And like the maniac I am, I decided I was going to cover all of it.
Right.
And you're often seeing physiological changes that range from subtle to not, you know, again, a guy, fine, his testosterone is dropping over age. That's basically it. You know, low testosterone male, training may be a little bit different than a high testosterone male. That's about it. Women can be in any one of these different categories, and it can really drastically affect, you know. Again, in broad strokes, of course, the generalities always hold in terms of fat loss or, you know, nutritional requirements, but you do see some subtle differences in terms of the potential for insulin resistance or sensitivity to be there. Fuel use changes, how birth control may affect mood, appetite, you know, all
this can get really, really overwhelming. I mean, obviously,
oh, yeah.
You know this incredibly well. And this is, I've been listening to talks in the last several years of women like Janet Alexander or Ali Gilbert or female coaches who really cover this topic pretty well. But where do you start? Because if a woman's coming into a room right now and listening to the first 5 minutes of your conversation, they're going to be way worse off than they were before they came in. They're going to say, all right, now I'm really screwed. Like, is there a way that you're able to kind of, and yes, the answer is probably read your book, and we're going to, of course, recommend people to do that, but where can we start?
Well, really the first thing, and this is, you know, I base everything off the menstrual cycle. Like, that's kind of really the base difference in physiology. And just to kind of quickly sketch that out, it's an average 4-week cycle, can actually vary from 24 to 32 days. Starts day one is menstruation, just by convention. So that's the start of her menstrual cycle. The first 2 weeks are called the follicular phase. This is when the egg is developing. Estrogen, one of the primary female hormones, starts low, sweeps up at ovulation before it comes back down. Progesterone starts very low, starts to go up. So ovulation is the midpoint. At ovulation, the egg is released. Estrogen will crash down and come back up, and progesterone will increase to about the middle of that second 2-week part, which is called the luteal phase. and then they'll both crash down into week 4, which is when PMS will typically occur if it's going to be. And even that's variable. Something like 30% of women may suffer from premenstrual syndrome. A percentage of those may suffer from what's called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which may be marked by, excruciatingly painful cramps, suicidal ideation. Like, many women are truly incapacitated. It's a relatively small percent, but to say that, I'm not to be dismissive. Women that have it, it's their, that's a real existence. A nurse practitioner I know, they will add an antidepressant to medical treatment for that 4th week, like the bipolar treatment, just because some women will get suicidal. And again, other women will feel nothing. So in the first half of the cycle, estrogen tends to be, it's thought of as the bad hormone. It's really, most of its effects are good. Increases fat burning in the skeletal muscle, increases insulin sensitivity. So women tend to burn more carbs and less fat, both at rest and during exercise. Tends to blunt hunger and appetite. And just a bit of trivia I know you'll appreciate. Estrogen peaks right before ovulation. Right, that's when a woman is most fertile. There's a little testosterone spike, which might be important for training, is probably to increase your sex drive. Right, this is all for pregnancy. A researcher had theorized that the big spike in estrogen, which makes women not be hungry for food or drink, it's to allow them to have to be hungry for, shall we say, pleasures of the flesh. Basically, they're not interested in eating or drinking because they want to go get laid. And they've actually shown women, the higher their sex drive, the lower their appetite, and vice versa. Like, no joke. This has been demonstrated. So wow. There's all these changes at ovulation. Women's hips swing differently. They've shown that strippers are more likely, they get better tips because they give off a more sexual vibe. Women are more likely to accept a phone, like they're much more receptive. Again, this makes sense. This is when she's most fertile. So that's the first half. Like I said, good insulin sensitivity, good recovery from training, generally speaking. There can be some water retention right before the middle of the cycle, which for women tracking body weight or dieting can drive them crazy. And I'll come back to this because this is an important thing for women and just to understand. As you move into the second half of the cycle, progesterone becomes kind of dominant and makes women insulin resistant, which means they don't handle carbs as well. Their blood sugar can get a little bit unstable, which can affect mood. Their metabolic rate goes up a little bit, but that's when they get their hunger and cravings, that can easily offset that. So metabolic rate may go up by a couple hundred calories, but food intake, if it's uncontrolled, usually goes up higher. She's much more prone to storing fat, especially in her hips and thighs, and during that part of the cycle. Going into the final week, which is typically when PMS will occur if it happens, cravings can be huge. Mood swings can be enormous, or not, maybe non-existent. Women are much more variable than men in my experience. Cramping starts to occur as her body starts to shed the lining. So in sort of a global sense, from a dietary standpoint, you would tend to want higher carbs and lower fat in the first half of the cycle. Mm-hmm. Slightly lower carbs and higher fat, which tends to be better for insulin resistant in the second half of the cycle. And I'm not talking about staggering changes. Like, I'm talking about, if we assume proteins at, say, 25% of calories or whatever, carbs might be 50% and fat the other 25% in the first half of the cycle, and that might drop to 40 and 30 in the second half of the cycle, right? So we're talking about enormous changes.
What would that be? I'm trying to calculate in my head when I'm normally looking at the diet. I never really go off a percentage. I'm more going off of.
I don't either.
Yeah, no, but I actually will take it up a notch, and I'll go more towards grams per pound of body weight. So would that be proteins? Would that be more like 0.25 grams per pound of body weight? Like, how would you calculate that?
We're on the same page. So women do need slightly less protein than men for a number of reasons. Differences in body composition. Actually, estrogen decreases protein breakdown during exercise. If you give men estrogen, they'll actually burn less protein during aerobic exercise. So there's your new contest prep strategy. So your average woman, who's in, say, a 25 to 30% body fat range, I would say something like, 0.8 up to 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. As women get very lean, and I don't know if your clientele is like physique dieters, we're talking about women dieting to the extremes, protein intake can go up, but on average, that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound lean body mass is probably about right. And I'm sure you've run into that. Like, you'll give women these numbers. And for an average woman, that might be 120, 130 grams a day. And they'll go, oh my God, that's so much protein. You're like, no, it's really not. Like a can of tuna fish is 30 grams. Greek yogurt is 13 grams. A 4-ounce chicken breast that's this big is like 30 grams. If you just have protein at 3 or 4 meals a day, you're there. But women frequently don't have a taste for protein. You can't. They live on carbs and fat.
Right.
Which is also a big part of the problem. If you can get them to increase their protein and decrease their carbs moderately with weight training, magic happens. So let me run some quick numbers. So let's say you've got a woman who needs 125 grams of protein. It's 500 calories of protein. Say she's on 1,800 calories a day. She might be on, say, 225 grams of carbs. That's about 50%. So you're looking at 1.5 grams per pound, Yeah, probably in that range for the average sized woman. 25% fat, which is somewhere maybe 0.5 gram per kilo, about about 2.25 grams per pound. It would be about 50 grams of fat per day would be about right for that typical woman. We're saying she's maybe 150 pounds, 25% body fat, like it's going to be in that range. So we're looking at a daily diet during that first half of the cycle, 125 grams of protein, 225 grams of carbs, 50 grams of fat,
okay,
which is pretty reasonable. Then in the second half, we're going to maybe reduce carbs, to say 1 gram per pound. So maybe 150 grams of fat per day. You're going to add, 150 grams of carbs per day. So 500. And her fat might go up to 70 grams of fat. So we're not talking about, these staggering variations.
But, and I agree with you 1,000% here. It's actually refreshing because the majority of the people that come into me, they're under eating and they don't really understand the importance of fuel as food is medicine. And I'm going to bring it up again, and Derek's probably going to roll his eyes, but I keep giving, like when I just shot the cover of Muscle and Fitness, and when I prep for that, I in the past have done carb deloading, water deloading, dehydrate, and I refuse to do it because I walk around pretty lean all year long. And I went into the shoot it was a 5-week prep that I had, and I went in at 275 grams of protein, 300 grams of carbs, and 90 grams of fat, which you'd probably think is probably even a little too low for a guy my size. But I lost 10 pounds.
Right.
In that 5-week period. So I technically got myself into a deficit, and I refused to put myself into that state of starvation because I said to myself, I want this to represent someone who can walk around like this all year long. And when I get myself into a carb deficit or I lower my carbs below the level it really should be, I start looking worse. I start looking, and I hate using the word, I'm sorry. I start looking fatter. I actually start getting softer. And when my body develops this tolerance to good, healthy carbs, and my body's used to digesting 400, 450 grams of carbs a day, which is and I'm under that right now, but I think I should be living in, my body does better. Can you talk about that a little bit, whether you agree or please disagree with it?
I don't. Yes and no. Like the starvation, that is there is an issue. Like I actually got a good contest prep coach buddy, a guy named Eric Helms. And you've probably noticed this, right? Like when you're carrying a little more fat and you start your diet, first couple of weeks you look worse. He calls it the skinny, like you lose some muscle fullness, you drop some glycogen, you just look terrible for like 2. And kind of the same way that when you come out of a diet for the next 2 weeks, you look effing fantastic. And you're like, why couldn't, most guys carb up too late, carb up too slow, because now you're full, the water gets redistributed. You can't, as long as you're eating properly, you're not gaining a bunch of body fat. And it's like, it feels like there's a weird momentum. Like you come out of a gaining phase and it feels like you're gaining fat. You're not. It's just, you're kind of getting some weird, and you're like, I'm doing everything right. I look terrible. And then you but anyways, find homeostasis. What people forget, right? We talk about energy balance and calories in and calories out. Calories out is not a number. It's a number, but it's a moving number. And you see a lot of women doing, I think more so than men, although lately as male dieters have become more neurotic, you're seeing this a lot more often, right? So that logically, if I want to lose fat as quickly as possible, what should I do? I should eat as little as possible and do as much exercise as possible. And for women, that usually means cardio. So they go start doing the 2-hour-a-day cardio grind. They cut their calories. And yes, number one, they're not burning a lot of calories during the cardio. Being smaller, lower power outputs, their energy expenditure is going to be less. what we often forget is that the exercise contribution to your daily energy expenditure is not the big part of it. It's what you're doing the rest of the day. When you're on low calories and doing too much exercise, you're just tired all day. So you may be burning that 400, but you're going to sit around all evening, and you've just brought your maintenance actually, I hate to say lower than it would otherwise, but this does often happen, right? And we could get into the menstrual cycle dysfunction stuff, and that's more for an athletic issue. But when women's calories, what's called energy availability, which is the number of calories, it's calories in minus exercise. It's what the body has left over to run your brain, your kidneys, your heart, all the essential functions. When that goes below a certain point, women's bodies start to adapt. They reduce hormone levels, thyroid levels, metabolic rate goes down, cortisol goes up, like all of the bad things. And women see this earlier than men. Men's bodies are more resistant to low energy availability. So you get this woman, right? So she's doing all the cardio. She's not eating a lot. Her energy availability is very low. Her resting metabolic rate has gone down. Her non-exercise energy expenditure, that NEAT that happens the rest of the day, has gone down. Now you get her eating enough, cutting the cardio back, doing proper weight training. Her energy availability comes up. So actually her resting metabolic rate may be higher on less activity and more food. And this is very confusing and contradictory, but it's there. Like the data just says what it says, is you bring her to a more moderate deficit, hormones improve. Suddenly she's not exhausted all day. And you see it all the time online. Women who did the cardio grind, low calories, suddenly they get into weight training. They cut the cardio down or sometimes out. They increase their protein because that goes along with the weight training subculture. They moderate their carbs. And suddenly they're like, I am maintaining on 600 calories more than I was when I was dieting. And they're not gaining fat. They're staying as lean or getting leaner on significantly higher calories. Because to your point, they have reversed all of those negative adaptations. But you tell women that, what do you mean eating more will be, and they can train more intensely. And I think that's something, if you're involved in any type of intense weight training, you can't do it on low calories, especially on lowered carbs. You just can't. So there's another place that your exercise energy expenditure is probably going down.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny not to jump in because we could spend 5 hours on diet and the topic doesn't get boring for me or even more, 10 hours. But I always refer to a lot of the training that I do see, especially with all this group garbage going on. I refer to it as the entertainment effect. And I have to deal with a lot of these editors from different magazines, and they come in and they're under the assumption that they're doing high intensity. And I got to be honest, I very rarely see any type of high intensity in any type of group concept. When you're going in and you're running someone 30 seconds on and you're only giving them 10 seconds to move from machine to machine or piece of equipment to piece of equipment, that's not high intensity. There's no power output being put there. And I worked with a woman the other day who came in, and just trying to get her to generate speed is impossible. It's like trying to run a stick shift car and race it in first gear. Like, you're trying to have them stand on the gas, but they're not going. Yet all their bodies look the same. And I'd love you to dive in on this a little bit, because I think a lot of the women, unfortunately, they're becoming their worst enemies because of the entertainment effect, and because they're going into these classes and the heat's turned up and they're just moving around nonstop for 45 minutes. In my eyes, I think that's more steady state, because I think that their heart rates are probably not exceeding 150 beats per minute. There's nothing high output out of that, and they're not doing any type of HIIT training. So can you agree or disagree with me here? But I want to get your opinion.
I do. It's high fatigue training, which is not the same as high intensity training, right? You sweat a lot, you get out of breath, you get tired, but being tired is not the same as having necessarily worked at a high intensity. And so, and again, this is, yes, it is absolutely, there's that class effect and the entertainment effect in terms of you've shown up for a 45-minute class. We want to give you your money's worth. And I see trainers doing this too, or clients expect it. You tell them, look, we're doing a heavy set of squats or leg presses or whatever. You need 2 minutes rest. And in their mind, well, that's 2 minutes of my 45-minute session. What am I paying you for? Well, I can make you tired or I can make you better. And these are probably mutually exclusive. Even you look at like some of those high intensity training, they're like, take short rest to get no, muscle growth is not built through systemic because you're out of breath. If you're sucking wind, you're not able to train you're training at lower intensity. So I'm sure Derek could chime in. If you look at repeated sprint exercise, running 30 on, 15 off, that's not high intensity. Running 100 meters and resting 8 minutes is high intensity because you're actually giving it 100% effort. So yeah, it's making people tired. It's keeping them from getting bored for 45 minutes. That doesn't make it a quality workout.
It's the entertainment effect. And this is a big problem in fitness, especially coaches. They don't own the process. You got to go in and you got to own it a little bit. And I think as a coach, yes, you got to learn to give clients what they want. And I'm victim to it also. I bring a client in or when I was taking clients and it's the first session. And sometimes when you blister them with, if we're sitting around for 5 minutes because you have the person powerlifting, they're probably going to get a little bit annoyed. So you've got to kind of ease into it and I think earn their trust. But I truly believe that putting diet aside, because we all know the importance of diet and body composition, I'm rarely seeing, unless it's someone working with Derek or I'm sure yourself or at my club here, I'm rarely seeing anyone who's actually going in and training the right way that doesn't look good. And a lot of these women, like you said, they're on the elliptical trying to sweat the entertainment effect, yet their bodies aren't changing. But it's like a drug. You keep throwing a ball on the wall and it keeps coming back to you. Like the outcome's not going to change. You got to change it,
Well, sort of going back to something you meant as far as, training, and I've told people this, like I would have clients and like I knew what I wanted them to do. And they would, women, I want to do a little bit extra work, whatever, back of my arms, hips and thighs, guys want to do more ab work. We both know it's not going to have any real effect. So what? If I give them 10 minutes of that at the end, and I hate to use the word pander, but it is to a degree, right? They're coming in with preconceptions, what they think is right, and we can sit there and crap on it all day long and probably be correct, but it doesn't matter until you've got them believing that you are omnipotent and omnipresent and can get them results. Give them a little bit of what they want. Right? If you're going to have them do powerlifting for the first 40 minutes, cool. Last 20 minutes, run their ass into the ground. Give them whatever. Do the battle ropes. Do kettlebell. I don't care. Just if that's what keeps them coming back until you've brainwashed them, reprogram their belief system to proper training, then do it. Right? Because for beginners, adherence beats all of this crap. If you're dealing with an elite athlete and he comes in and tells you how he needs to be trained, well, then you don't need me as your coach. Clearly, you have all the answers, but then why are you here asking me for help? That's that specific population. That's that 1%. So anyway, I agree with you completely on that. I will say, I think for a lot of people, some people do just get bored. They do, and we can say, and I can do the same training for months on end. I think most athletes, you have to accept boredom. It's part of the process. I do think for the general public, you do have folks that just bore. I think that's why they jump classes. For a year, we have this kind of aerobics class, and then we have hot yoga and Zumba this. And back in the day, and you're probably too young to remember this, they tried making a slide board aerobics class. They took the single most boring modality. The only thing that's worse is the arm bike. But they took seriously. I was a speed skater. I would never do the slide board for fitness. It is the most boring ass thing you will ever do in your life. And they try to make a fitness class out of that. And so, but again, you can do that within the context of training. With my clients, with beginners, I give them the same exercise for 3 or 4 weeks, get them good at it. Then I go, okay, I'm going to give you a new set of it. Right about the time they were probably about to get bored shitless with that type of thing. Okay, let's introduce to give you some variety. And you can do that, again, use the variety on when you hammer them in the last 10 minutes of the workout. Fool around with that. Don't mess. But anyway, so that I agree with you on. I do think part of it is you have to give them what they want, while at the same time getting them to realize that maybe what they want is not what they need.
Derek, I want to get and this is where, Derek, I want you to take this a little bit, but I also, you hear this crap, and I can't stand it in our industry about the confusion method, which I don't even know. Is that really a scientific term? The answer is probably no. But I also see, because of this entertainment effect, and I'm hoping our viewers really take this to heart, because they feel like they got to switch things up so much, they're never actually improving any quality. And Derek, you're in the performance world. I'm probably a little bit more in between, performance aesthetics. We all talk about this, but you can't be switching things up so much to get better at it, correct?
Yeah. And I've been staying out of the conversation because you guys have been carrying this. This is great. The
jump in
stuff. Holy, it's like whoo over my head. But yeah, like there's this movement now towards like variability, like movement variability, and everybody's like, oh, you got to vary things up, and there's variability, and both you guys would agree, but it's very, very minute, in terms of the variability we're looking for. Like, Usain Bolt has, a different stride pattern, right versus left, but it's very minute. Yeah, it's different, but it's not that much. So I think there has to be variability, and I hate the word confusion, but you have to change it up. And like Lyle says, if you're doing really good stuff, then you have, leave 10% for doing the variety and making it fun. And I do this myself, because when we do sprint training, it's linear sprint training. Like you stand there, you fall, you run, you walk back. So it's as boring as it could possibly get. But then, we'll throw a med ball and then we'll sprint, or we'll, have a different start position. And we have nuances, and, and I'll tell jokes in between. So, and I remember when I first met Lyle, we went on this whole thing about like, oh, sprint training for fat loss, because sprinters have great body composition, right? And then we started to go to the extreme and said, well, pole vaulters and high jumpers have great body composition too, right? So why don't we just high jump for fat loss? And the whole point is there's a natural selection there. Like if you weigh less, you'll probably jump higher, right? Or vault higher. So I think people get, distracted very easily from what's actually doing the work for you. And maybe the confusion is in the marketing. I don't know. You guys know.
But did you just start to interrupt, but really quick, but didn't you just say, and the majority of people out there who are trying to get lean, they don't have the ability to sprint. And when I say that, I even mean it with hand them a med ball, Lyle. Hand someone a med ball who's used to going into a Barry's boot camp where they're just running for 1 minute and changing stations and moving. And in time, you're going to see, it's scientific fact. You're going to see that performance diminishes. You're going to see CrossFitters. I've worked with CrossFitters who've come in because they're all banged up. And I see that they may be holding a lot of muscle. They're not strong guys or girls. They're not as strong as people think. And in time, that movement quality becomes slower. And I just do believe that there is a huge correlation that, people out there, they're not believing it. We understand it because there's science behind it, but the people, the mass population do not understand that the ability to get the body to move fast on a dime, it does correlate with body composition.
Yeah. I did a lecture online last week, and I used the cheetah example. Like, cheetahs have great body composition. They're fast. You don't see cheetahs doing wind sprints and CrossFit in between, hunting, right? Otherwise, those guys would be dead.
Like, I think as far as the muscle confusion, that came out of bodybuilding, right? This was all back in the 70s, and they were, kind of figuring the game out, and Joe Weider had to invent everything. And the idea was like, oh, you have to just change it up and shock the system. And it's like, well, no, your biceps, no tension and fatigue. And that, fine, we can alter subtly, whether more focus on the long head with the shoulder, whatever, biomechanically. But for the most part, Arthur Jones was the one who said, by the time you can barbell curl 200 pounds, you will have biceps big enough to do anything short of fighting a bear, right? If you just keep – now there's a happy medium. And, of course, the Russians were big on all the variability, right? You go look at those manuals, man. They had like 200 variations on back squats. And it was like feet this and hands this and done this way and on a block and on 2 blocks and on a brick and on your grandma. Like, and nobody trains like that anymore. Like then the Bulgarians came along and said, ha, you're wrong. And I'd say the Chinese are somewhere in the middle as far as their Olympic lifting. But then, like to Derek's point, to build a certain biomotor capacity, there is variability within those methods, right? If you look at building your aerobic capacity, I was an endurance guy you can do 6 hours low intensity steady state. You can do 60 to 90 minutes close to threshold. And there's been some theorizing that those might have you can do like the Kenyans will do different types of runs. Sometimes they'll do low intensity steady state. They will do progressives where it's 20 minutes easy, 20 minutes medium, 20 minutes. But those are all variations on a theme, right? There's only so many ways to build top speed. Now, there are different methods. You can do, Derek can speak to this better than I can, standing start, rolling start, which is probably maybe a little bit different. For starts, you can do out of blocks, off the ground, from a stand, but you're still, these are all variations on, these are slightly qualitative differences. It's not like the bodybuilder is like, oh, you've been flat benching for two workouts. Now you need to go to dumbbell bench instead because no, all you're doing, if anything, is hurting your results, right? We know it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get those motor pathways done, back clicking. So just about the time you're ready to start making real progress, you're going to switch it up again. And on that note, because I know Derek will find this funny, Charles Poliquin once wrote in one of a manual I think only I've read, and is one of his old personal training manuals, right? And he would say, oh, I changed my athletes' workouts every 3 weeks, and they gained 5 to 10% strength. Right, but it's the same 5 to 10% every time, because every time you teach them a new exercise, it takes them 2 weeks to relearn it. So they're just making the same neural. But he said, I like to change my athletes' workout every 3 weeks, not only because they get better progress, but because they have to hire me more frequently. And that's the key to the confusion principle. You make your clients think that only you know the secret to how they should change their workout. They got to hire you more often.
Do you think that, do you believe that we're in a society now, we do not need as much variability as people think? Would you agree with that?
Oh, no, I think the variability, if anything, is more psychological. And I will agree with it in those terms. But again, athletes are a different mindset. They do what it takes. They do what has to be done to get to their goals because they are process oriented by and large, right? This is a means to an end. Again, the general public, you're dealing as much with psychologicalists. Like with athletes, you're worrying about mostly physiological stuff. But I think the general public, you're dealing more with psychological stuff. They may not want to be there, especially early on. They may bore, different personalities. Some people bore very, very easily. And with those, I find, I like I said, I'll do the same thing for 9 months and not get bored. I had a power lifter I was training. She would get bored about every 6 to 8 weeks. Now, I was never going to take her off competition movements, right? If you want to get better at squat, bench, deadlift, you have to do those, period. However, I would change up resistance movements because that's just donkey work, right? That's just like whatever. I don't give a damn what you're doing for your chest volume. I don't care. If we need to change your movements to keep you invested in your training within limits, I don't give a damn. And we'd be changing some supplemental stuff, but that was that mixture, right? The Bulgarians did complain of boredom doing the same workouts. And one of the swimming books I have, the author's talking about this coaching idea in swimming, because swimming, man, you can make a million different workouts of the same 6 variables. I don't understand swimming training. I never will. And he said the goal of training is not to keep the athlete entertained. It's to make them a better athlete, right? And if you can do that with the same 6 training sets, why wouldn't you? Other than if the trainee gets bored, they stop working as hard. So that may be a practical reason to introduce some. But even with that context, right? Like the sprint example, if you're doing hypertrophy training, right? Even if you never switch exercises, some people do, some people don't. They both get you to that goal. You can still change the loading patterns. You can do more power building. You can do 5s. You can do 6 to 8s. You can go 12 to 15 and do pump training. You can alter workout density. There's variability doesn't have to mean do a different damn workout every single day or change exercises every day or CrossFit, which is random training. It's whatever was on the CrossFit website that day is the workout of the day. That's random variability. There's that systematic variability that you can, all right, I'm going to work a little bit more on strength. Maybe it's a little more type 2 fibers. Maybe it's more neural training so that I'll be stronger, right? If I can increase my 5 RM bench, when I go back to 8 to 10s, I'll be able to use heavier weights. So it's variability within still doing the same set of exercises.
Right.
And even then, right, I've seen a lot, there's some silliness around this whole exercise variability. And it's like, well, if you were only doing squats, you needed, who the hell only does squats? Like it's such a straw man argument, right? Because there was a study they did on variability, and it was they either did all squats or they did squats and 3 other exercises, right? They didn't vary anything across they gave 2 different workouts, one which had more variability inherent to it. And this group saw growth in muscles that the squat, well, no shit. Who, it's like squats alone won't give you good glutes. I don't disagree. Who's ever said it would? Who in the training world has ever only squatted for lower body? No human, well, maybe Mark Repito, but regardless, like for the most part, people just don't do that. So there's variability, and then there's random training, which is a whole nother thing. So I think we're all on kind of the same page that there's a continuum, right? I don't think Derek would have a sprint athlete do the same start workout 3 days a week forever. He would give variability within the specifics of how you train the starts or top speed.
I'm more interested on how you're going to answer this. I mean, I have my opinion, but
Please.
I've been in the industry now 20 years. I've been doing this my entire life. And I was always taught early on that, you keep the goal and you got to have a goal. But the way that I've always trained, to be honest, was once baseball ended for me, I never had a goal. It was a mixture between body composition and wanting to look great, but be really strong. And I could accept the fact that I may not be optimal at the deadlift. Fine, maybe I never pulled over 600 pounds. I pulled 560. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I never squatted. Maybe I never squatted 550, but I did hit 500. So I kind of was able to live with the fact that maybe I wasn't exceptional in one area, but I was pretty good. I was pretty solid in all of them.
Yeah.
Why is that a bad thing for a person to not necessarily have one goal in mind? Because in the strength and conditioning world, it's like, oh, you got to have a goal.
Right.
You got to have a goal. Like you trained, like you went out and you ran, like you worked on endurance, but you're working on power on Monday. You know what I'm saying? So what's your opinion on all that?
I think a lot of that, people are extremely myopic and projective. If all they want to do is be strong in the squat, they think that is what defines, to them, that is the criterion goal for everyone, because that's what they like doing. And they tend to make some really silly machos. I've seen endurance athletes do it too. If you're not like, oh, you want to get healthy, you should run, right? I once had a guy during a bike ride. He loved triathlons. Oh man, you should dude, I did triathlons in high school. I don't want to do that. I was terrible at swimming. He's like, no, I think you should really go back, because that's what he enjoyed. I'm like, well, that's great. I'm glad you like it. That doesn't make it right for me any more than my training is right for you. I do think in a general sense, having some sort of goal, right? People come in, they go, I want to get fit. Well, what does that mean? Like it's that whole goal setting, that your goal should be specific and measurable and the smart paradigm. Like, okay, I want to lose weight. Okay. Or I want to improve body composition. Well, what does that mean in concrete terms? Now, I'm not saying they have to go, I want to be 160 at 12%, yada, yada, yada. But if someone says, oh, I just want to lose weight, I think that is not a concrete enough goal. I think saying that you must have a goal of being a power lifter or a strongman or a bodybuilder, I do think that becomes very limiting. Because for the general public, it's probably not realistic. If it ever is, it will be down the road, right? Early on, they don't know what they want. They want to be fitter or healthier, or let's be honest, they want to look better naked. That's what 95% of our clients want. They don't, oh, I want to be healthier. No, you don't. You want to look better naked. It's fine. It's a perfectly valid goal, but unless you're 65, you don't want to be healthier. You want to look better with your clothes off. And so that's great. For some people, I do think, some people find that picking that goal, I'm going to do a powerlifting competition in 12 months or 12 weeks is very focusing, but I think that also tends to come later in the game. I wouldn't have a beginner pick that necessarily. The beginner just needs to get habits and needs to get in the gym. And maybe if they have a goal, it should be to train consistently 3 to 4 times a week for 6 months.
Right. And I actually agree with you. The only time I would say it's okay is and it's rare, if someone comes in you and like, I want to look better, I want to be more fit, I want to look better naked, and then 4 to 6 weeks later, they're like, I'm on the right track, I feel awesome, I couldn't be happier, great. But how often do we really think about this? And for the people listening, how often, it reminds me of the guy, and Lyle, you know this guy. He shows up to you in a party, and it's immediate. You know what I'm going to. You're laughing. He shows up to you in a party, and he's like, John, this is what I do. Lyle, man, he said he doesn't even ask you how you're doing. This is what I do. And I've gotten to the point now where I'll listen because I'm a polite person, but I'll turn to him or her and say, well, how's that working for you?
Right.
Like, you're like, what do you want me to say? Are you telling me or are you asking my advice? Because if they turn around, they're like, listen, I feel great. I look great. I'm like, conversation's over.
Yeah,
why are we still having this? But if they turn around and they're actually like, well, am I doing something wrong? Then I'm like, all right, dude, listen, man, like you want me to be honest with you? Like you just told me what you're doing. You want me to agree with you. You look like shit. You look like shit. And the reality is like, you don't want to hear what I have to tell you.
Yeah, I learned early on to sort of, you can tell by how they present whether they're asking for information or affirmation. I see it a lot online. As soon as someone asks for advice, you give it and they kind of like, okay, look, you don't want, or they post the same question in 6 different places. Like, you're not asking for help. You want to be told that what you're doing is fine, and that's great, but I'm done. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. You know, a guy years ago came up to me and he said, you know, I really like to learn how to do squats, but they scare me. He wasn't saying he wanted me to teach him how to do squats. He was just making noise. I'm like, oh, okay, that's too bad. Or he said I had a trainee who was just busting her ass. He goes, I could look like that. If I work that hard, well, yeah, but you're not going to on either count, so I don't care. That's great. And I just nodded and smiled. And if someone comes up and says, you know, hey, I see you train or whatever, can you help me with this? I'll give them as much time as I have because that person wants help. And it would be really crappy of me to walk away from them. But I can usually tell one way or the other. I do want to go back to one point.
Guys, sorry.
I didn't know it was a Tinder group chat.
We're not in a Tinder group
chat. It's all good.
We're actually, hold on.
Yeah.
You want to say hi?
Hello.
Say hi to Lyle.
Howdy.
What's up?
How much? How you doing?
Good, thanks. If you guys are asking about training, I know more than this guy.
That doesn't surprise.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
She's got fight training right now, which means we have to go downstairs.
I wanted to go back to one thing you mentioned in terms of, like, since we were sort of ostensibly talking about women before we got off topic, which is, you know, sort of women and body composition. And this is sort of how I want to tie kind of all together what we've talked about, right? Okay. So the typical women's approach to getting in shape, right? They tend to not like to eat a lot of protein. They overemphasize carbs. They frequently cut fat to the lowest levels possible, right? Fat makes you fat, so we must cut fat to 0 levels. They grind endless cardio, and they get nothing. And there's a number of reasons. The majority just don't seem to see much progress with that. I know there are some, usually when I've known, like I years ago I knew this aerobics instructor, and she was in great shape, but here's why. She did heavy weight training when she wasn't teaching aerobics classes, and that was the key to it. And I'm sure her diet. So you get those women, and then suddenly they, you know, and if they're weight training, it's just kind of pissing around with 3-pound dumbbells. And I saw a wonderful thing online today. Apparently, a Hollywood trainer said that women should always use narrow grips because wide grips make your muscles bulky and narrow grips make them
Interesting.
You can't make this kind of crap up.
Just to give this one credit, because I've been working with her for a while, and we've actually, Blake, you've always trained like a guy.
Well, here's the thing. I think sorry, you're asking him the question, but I think that's an overgeneralization of women. When you say they tend to, that's always sort of.
Well, yeah, it is, and actually, and I'll come back to that because it is changing in the modern world.
Yeah, my generation, I can speak to millennials, we grew up understanding the emphasis of protein. We grew up with our parents going on the Atkins diet, cutting out all carbs, and then like Mr. Atkins passing away.
That's actually, thank you. That's a really good point. And you're right. So, I'm 47, and the generation of women that I saw in the gym was that. I'm sorry, you are right. I'm overgeneralizing to my being an old fart. And I still see women doing it, but you are right. In the era of Instagram and Facebook, and women are seeing, okay, here's a female power lifter who looks amazing. Here's these females that are lifting some heavy ass weights who look phenomenal. And I actually have seen a really big influx of women in the sports of powerlifting, Olympic lifting, in the weight room, training much more appropriately. So actually that's a very good point, and I appreciate you making it. Because what I was going to say is if you look at that, endless aerobics, excess carbs, it ties in with the physiology. Women's muscles actually tend to spare muscle glycogen, right? They do burn proportionally more fat than men during aerobic exercise, but it's still a very small absolute amount, and it tends to come from intramuscular, the fat stored within the muscle.
So, but what you're saying to women is weight train more.
Well, that, and this is also where high intensity interval training can come in very handy. So we know that in general, whatever a muscle's full of, it uses for fuel, right? So if a muscle's full of glycogen all the time, it will pick carbohydrates for fuel. So women will use fat during aerobic exercise, but burn carbs the rest of the day. Men use carbs during aerobic exercise, but shift to fat because they deplete their muscle glycogen. So as soon as you get women to get off the cardio grind, frequently raise their calories so they're not having those metabolic effects, get them to get enough sufficient protein, which invariably tends to go along with getting them into proper resistance training because it's just part of that subculture. They moderate their carbs. Suddenly they start depleting their muscle glycogen. And this occurs if they get into high intensity interval training proper. When they're going 45 seconds hard, 45 to 60 seconds rest, they start depleting muscle glycogen. Proper weight training does it. And they turn themselves into, as much as I hate to use the phrase, a fat burning machine. Basically, when they start training, because what does a man do when he wants to get in shape? He lifts weights and he eats protein.
But before she has to go, because I know she's got her, we have our appointment downstairs. Can you quickly, we talked about the entertainment effect earlier.
Yeah.
And we talked about how.
Wait, just to close the loop on that thing. I think the biggest, sorry, I'm just going to pipe in here because no one invited me to. I think that the biggest thing is that when men go to the gym, their general goal is to build and grow. And so what we've seen since, I don't know, the beginning of time or Arnold Schwarzenegger is like, oh, you lift weights. And then women's goal generally is to tighten up. And that ends up being slimming. And you think like, oh, if men are doing this to build, then cardio is the thing that's going to trim down. So I think it's just more about shifting the mentality that like that it's about how you build. It's about what weights you lift, what intensity you do it at. Because it's not just like, oh, weights build muscle where cardio slims you down. It's about how you use those things.
You and I always went more intense on lifting.
Yeah, we've always done weights. So it's just more about the conversation shifting to, because like, all of the nuances, like if people are really into it, they can talk about how you burn carbs versus how you burn fat and all of that. But I think that like if you eat a well-balanced diet and then it just shifts the conversation from like cardio isn't the way to slim down and tighten up. But if you do,
I agree. But even saying a balanced diet, I do. Again, what I typically saw, again, this is my generation, what I saw as a trainer, women weren't eating anything. They were eating 80% carbs because protein, and they just didn't have a taste for protein. So yes, now that protein is
12-year-olds now are like running from carbs. It's terrifying. It's like you look at young girls on Instagram and they're like,
it's like all about happy.
I got upset the other day, and hear me out. My daughter's 10 years old. And I was shocked. I actually got upset. She looked at me. She goes, "I got to go on a diet." And I said, "Oh, geez, about, honey." I'm like, "What do you see? That's nonsense. Like, I'm a fitness guy. No, you're fine. You make good food choices." But it's this whole thought process. And
absolutely,
it's disturbing to me that my 10-year-old girl would actually think that. We're in life right now. All I'm trying to do is just steer her in a good direction. Let her make some good, solid choices on her own, and make sure that my parenting sets her up for success in the future. But dieting, I think that's...
And I think even that will be generational. We have generations of women starting their little girls on diets at very early ages. And we've now got a generation that's grown up on the internet with knowledge about why this is so damaging, that I do think, well, at least I hope going forwards, we're going to see when the millennials start having kids, assuming they're not destroying the childbirth industry, because my understanding is millennials are destroying every industry, right? I think that's all.
Well, because you're not a millennial. That's what everyone's afraid of millennials. So.
Well, yeah, but my parents were afraid of my generation.
Totally, I know. Like everybody's afraid of the next generation because they
afraid of the ones after you. But
totally
not being so obnoxious. But I wonder. I certainly hope that this is going to have a feed-forward effect. Your generation, who's coming up with access to much better information, will be teaching that to their children, and hopefully will get out eventually a lot of that older information that was, it's pathological. It's a pathological approach to health, fitness, dieting, and everything. Hopefully that will at least die down.
All right, well, listen, I would love to continue this conversation. I could talk for hours on this. Thank you for making an appearance.
Yes, thank you.
Lyle, We got to meet in person, man. This was stimulating. Okay. I love it. Derek, I love you, bud.
I was just along for the ride, man.
He's in Vancouver. That's what it's
No way.
With my podcast partner, Derek Hansen.
Oh, man, you got to go get some rain or shine. Speaking of diet.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. I think we put too much emphasis on diet, and that's the thing that Don always says to me. He's like, try not to eat processed foods, like, and it's a luxury. If you can afford to, like, you know, buy foods like from a farmer's market or organic food, like, you know, as long as you're not eating processed food and you're finding the balance between protein, greens, and a carb, then go have that ice cream, go have that cookie, because otherwise you're gonna go crazy. Like, you gotta, if you want to go long term, like, eat what you love, but you know,
absolutely.
You know,
I agree.
So
I agree completely. I wish more people did it, and it's hard to get them just very randomly to finish. We're talking about, you know, goals, and this paper just came out. It's 2 years and 1 month long. This one researcher, he had folks come in, and all they focused on was getting fitter. This is a very properly, logically periodized weight training aerobic program over 2 years. All they focused on was, I just want to get fitter and healthier, and they all lost weight. And I think that's a really interesting contrast to people who come in and go, I want to lose weight, because you're never going to be happy with that. The numbers never go down quickly enough. It's an end criterion that, while useful, can be extremely damaging and self-defeating. So there's a logic to, if you just come in and just start working on training more intensely, to your point, just eating, you know, moderately and quote unquote healthily with a balance of the different macros, you'll probably get to where you need to be, and you'll be a lot fitter and healthier and functional than if your goal was must lose weight.
Well, yeah, because when you're fit, you actually gain weight because of muscle. So, like, there's times when the scale goes up and I'm in better shape, and it's very confusing. But
well, I always say, I'm like,
all about education.
Are you more concerned with what the scale says, or are you more concerned with how you look and how you feel?
But even that is something that it has traditionally been difficult to get. You know, there's these magic body weights. I had a girl years ago, and she's like, I want to weigh 135. Why? Where does this arbitrary number come from? Is it because that's a bar and a wheel on each side on a bench press? Like, I don't know where these numbers come from. But even women who know about body composition, I know a lot of physique competitors, when their body weight starts to move up and down during menstrual cycle dynamics and stuff, they know better, and it still drives them nuts. There's still just this.
Because everybody has body dysmorphia, but also the media says, "Oh, this person," and they quote their weight, or, you know, there's such an emphasis on it that, like, how do we not put an emphasis on it? You know.
But getting people out of that mindset is just so difficult to do, because, oh, my body weight's up, and then they go, but I've lost inches and my clothes fit better. Okay, what's more important? Yeah. You know, what is more important to you, that this arbitrary number is up by a couple pounds because you had some salt, or that you look better, feel better, clothes fit better?
But there's some ads, like there's some ads where it shows, like, all these women of different shapes and sizes and colors and ethnicities and backgrounds and all of that, and they're all the same weight. And there's more responsible, I think, messaging now, and
agreed.
It's about perpetuating that.
I agree.
We gotta go kick some butt.
She's gonna go fight.
Okay. Well, thanks, Lyle. Just let me say, Lyle's still at bodyrecomposition.com. That's right, Lyle?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Super.
go get Rain or Shine ice cream.
Rain or Shine.
I'm not joking. It's so good. That cracked mint. Oh my gosh. And the malted milk chocolate. Oh.
Lyle, thank
and then
you.
on Tuesday they do Taco Tuesdays.
Okay. Then I'll lift some weights. Okay. Got it.
There you go. Sounds good. Bye, y'all.
Bye.